Awesome. I will get started. Andy, just double checking. You can hear me okay? I haven't just been talking to myself this whole time. Excellent. Okay. Welcome everyone. Really grateful that you're here to join us today. I am Tessa Danelesko and I'm the co-executive director of the Impact Communications Institute. I am so happy that you're all here. We'll be sharing and learning ways that we can use words to build relationships with racialized and marginalized communities that you serve today. Really focusing on approaches that are rooted in trust building and transparency, and I think most importantly, reciprocity. If I could underline that word and bold it, I would. I am joining you today from the stolen lands of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and the Squamish Okameo, the Squamish Nation in North Vancouver, BC, Canada. I actually live right next to a Squamish village called Eshlehan, which traditionally has been a clam harvesting place. And the clam garden unfortunately doesn't exist today due to development, but there are some amazing Indigenous-led restoration efforts being undertaken to restore these beautiful waters and the land that we're so fortunate to be on for future generations. I'll start by talking a little bit about myself, and that's because I come by our topic for this session very honestly. I am mixed race Indigenous and a very proud citizen of the Métis Nation of BC, but I didn't have the privilege of growing up immersed in Métis culture. Colonialism, systemic racism really meant that my dad and my grandma diminished their indigeneity. But after many years of rebuilding our Métis ties, my brother and I have found our way back. And today we have strong community connections and a story of reconnection and reclamation that makes our family and our community very proud. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of my experience and my lessons learned with all of you today. But before we begin, I'll just cover a few community guidelines for our time together. We just ask that to honor the time that's gone into planning this session, to please keep yourselves on mute. We do invite participation and we'll share the platform as we go along. We've got some planned time for Q&A. We also ask that everyone respect the opinions of others. If opportunities arise, please remember to critique the idea and not person. And please note this session is being recorded and we will share it on our YouTube channel along with all of the other ICI's impact councils. If you're joining us for the first time today, you might be thinking, what is the ICI or how did I end up here? The Impact Communications Institute is a registered nonprofit on a mission to use the tools of storytelling to drive systemic change. We are a global network of over 1,200 communicators committed to purpose-led practices. If you haven't yet, take our pledge on our website at impactcommusinstitute.org. That pledge is for the use of responsible and purpose-led communications. And that'll also get you on our list to hear about future programming. I'm really humbled to welcome Naz Lauriault to the ICI, to our session today. The ICI's founder, Melissa Orozco and Naz have come up in the impact communications world together. And I was on a call with them recently. It was such a treat to hear them speak about the evolution of the practice and the sector, and how they've really met and leveled the pace of change to develop resilient and innovative purpose-driven businesses. Needless to say, there's lots of wisdom in the room. I find there's lots of power in hearing folks introduce themselves in their own words, so I will invite Naz to share a little bit more about herself and begin our learning. Naz, over to you.
Thank you, Tessa. It is such an honor and a privilege to share space with everyone that's taken the time to be here today. My name is Naz Lauriault. I'm the founder and managing director of 50th Parallel Public Relations. My pronouns are she, her. I am a hyphenated Canadian is how I identify myself. I am Guyanese Kurdish Canadian. And so for those of you who haven't heard the term hyphenated Canadian, what it means is that you call Canada home, but you have roots elsewhere. And like Tessa, I would really like to start off with a territorial acknowledgement as well. I do this as part of my ongoing work to defining reconciliation for myself and the communities that we work with and the territories we get to very humbly reside on. So currently I am on the territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations in Victoria. I'm lucky to be here as a guest where I reside with my husband and my newborn Atlas, who is 15 weeks this Saturday, and my dog Hunter. Okay.
Amazing. So, you know what, Naz, we didn't discuss. Would you like me to share the screen or would you like to?
I can pull it up. Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We'll jump right in. I think you're just on mute there, Naz.
Actually, if you can share the screen, that would actually be better for me.
You betcha.
Thank you.
If you don't mind pausing your screen share, I'll be able to pop it up. There we go.
Well, Tessa is pulling that up. I want to say that here in Canada, we're getting ready for National Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st. We'll touch on it a little bit later in the presentation. But we're really topical conversation around language that we're going to be having today. It is a hard conversation to have. So I'm really excited and encourage those who have either worked with Indigenous communities or curious about working with Indigenous communities to ask questions about, you know, even the hard stuff, the mistakes that we've made that we've had to learn from, things that I've had to overcome personally with the work that we do as a non-Indigenous agency, working with communities. One thing that I didn't touch on that I wanted to, Tessa, I think you just have the notes up.
Okay.
I just see, yeah, your questions.
There we go. That work?
It's still showing your brief.
Oh.
And your calendar, yeah. We can also.
You gotta love, like, this far into the pandemic, I feel like the AI tool I need is just something that shares my screen really easily. So we can go.
Yeah.
Oh, is this looking okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, you got it.
Thank you. So we can kind of go through here quickly. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and then next slide. Okay, perfect. So as I mentioned, I kind of spoke to my title. That's really the superficial stuff. Really what I want to focus on is kind of talking more about, you know, the personal work that I had to go through to do the work that I do now. So we are going to be speaking to specifically the work that I have done with my team with Indigenous communities, but I will say that I have a long history of working with historically marginalized communities, just because of my past experience with my own family. I was born and raised in Windsor, Ontario. My parents are first-generation Canadians who came to Canada in the 70s. My dad is a war refugee from Kurdistan, and my mom came here as a student from Guyana. And so I was really lucky to be raised in a really multicultural home. One thing that I went through as part of my self-reflection, self-appraisal work a few years ago when I started undergoing thought leadership my thought leadership process is reflecting on the role I had in my home with my family. And so what I was able to uncover through that process is that I really was the spokesperson for my parents who came here and hid their culture. My dad speaks 7 different languages, and we were only raised to speak English in our home. And that was because my parents really wanted us to not stand out or be overlooked for jobs, for opportunities. And so they wanted our English to be really immaculate. And through that, I did end up having a disconnect with my culture. And so when I worked through this thought leadership work, I really was able to uncover that the work I do with communities, with individuals who feel like they've been rendered powerless, is because my own parents went through that experience. And I acted as a bridge for them, for the external community, for the outside world where they often felt like an outsider. And so as an adult, especially now as a new mom, what I'm working towards is trying to regain my sense of cultural identity. A lot of what Tessa spoke to about her own personal experience is that we can't really do impactful work until we can really dig down deep and understand what drives us to do that work. And so while it's not an easy journey to go through, it is a fulfilling process that really connects deeply to the work that I am so privileged to do with Indigenous communities. What our process is really focused on is listening first, and taking the time to get to know people and their struggles. I often say it's all about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and not shying away from those conversations that really uncover the root of the struggles that people had to endure, especially within Indigenous communities, and never making assumptions. So we'll discuss later more about cultural humility and how that's really important to consider when you're working with Indigenous communities or historically marginalized communities, really. Tessa, you can, perfect. Yeah, so my team, up until recently, we identified as an all-female team. A few years ago, we did some gender inclusivity work and really looked at why we almost celebrated that. And it wasn't so much the gender that we celebrated, but the powerful people behind the work that we do. And so we actually aren't all female anymore. Mauricio is on the call. Our first historic male hire on our team is here today. But we are a full service public relations agency. Our team is kind of post-COVID spread out across British Columbia. We became a B Corp early last year, spring last year. That was a process that took us quite a while to get through, but really humbling experience that held us accountable to our purpose and the clients we work with. So I'm really grateful to have gone through that, because it really was clear that we want to be an impact-focused agency, much like Yulu PR, who is also on the call today. We are very inspired by other agencies doing work and motivated by doing good in the world. And so, public relations is such an interesting term, because a lot of people historically think that you're a spin doctor, or you're here to alter people's opinions, or divert from negativity. And really, it is a force for good. It is a really strong focus on storytelling that we do, and shedding light on issues that deserve to be amplified. And so I'm really fortunate to have some of my team on the call today joining us. So you're all here for a very specific purpose. The takeaways I like to address kind of right in the beginning of a presentation, so that we can keep that front of mind throughout. So really, we're here because communications can be an extractive, perpetuating the oppression of racialized and marginalized communities. This may be intentional or not, but as impact communicators, we're responsible for using storytelling in service of communities. Really, 2 takeaways that we want you to consider today is for finding respectful language to honor the communities you serve, and then identifying the niche that your communications practice can have the greatest impact. So I mentioned earlier that I underwent some thought leadership work myself. This is something that we do a lot with the leaders that we work with as well. But I really wanted to go through it myself first so that I could speak to the value that thought leadership work can offer. Yeah, that's right, Giselle. How thought leadership work can offer and really amplify leaders in their industries that they serve. And so I'm going to read this directly. This was from a blog post I did shortly after my thought leadership work was completed, where I was really able to bring in all the common thread and the thoughts and ideas that I had around why I do the work I do. It wasn't just because I was really motivated to support Indigenous communities, but it had a greater meaning for me. And so I say in this blog post, is just an excerpt, is that I do this work because I was born to a refugee and an immigrant, settlers to Canada, who left behind their countries and their culture to create a better life for their children. They gave up their identity and everything they knew, and in the process lost the power of their voice, and I lost my connection to culture. No way of speaking to my dad in his first language, no way of creating my mother's traditional foods, because my parents hid in a time they felt like they had no other choice. I did not realize that I identified as brown until I was 11 years old, and I was embarrassed. The reason why I did not discover until later in my 20s. So through this work, I am able to connect with those who are also doing the work to reconnect with, preserve, and celebrate their culture. This work is healing. Okay. So I have this quote up on the screen. It was a quote that was used in an article written by Catherine Lafferty for the Tyee in 2021. The quote says, "I have not hesitated to tell this House again and again that we could not always hope to maintain peace with the Indians, that the savage was still a savage, and that until he ceased to be savage, we were always in danger of collision, in danger of war, in danger of outbreak." So this was a quote from our former first Prime Minister in Canada, Sir John A. Macdonald. This is stated in July 1885 when the Prime Minister addressed the Parliament, reaffirming a cultural bias at the time that had been so dominant that the Indian was a threat and danger to society. She continues in her article, which is linked in the slide, and I understand these slides will be circulated after. So if you want to read the whole article, I do encourage you to do so. This was only the beginning of the cruel and racist legislation that continues to oppress Indigenous people today. This narrative has been regurgitated over and over by media and government officials for decades and has justified the horrific acts of cleansing the Indian with the creation of residential schools on the 60s scoop. All injustices meant to wipe a race of its cultural identity, especially its language. Language is forever lost in some communities as the last fluent speakers begin to pass on. And so really important to start off here and really understand the long history, the injustices that Indigenous communities have faced, and how fractured some communities are because of the media and government officials. Okay, and so one thing I really want to stress is communication is connection. So we're very lucky as communicators here who are driven by purpose and impact. We have a role and we have the opportunity to be responsible to use our craft to foster social justice and to support the revival of what is endangered. And so language, especially, like I will cover in the next following slides, I speak to it as preserving cultural language as well as terms and the importance of considering those when you're working with communities.
And Naz, I just wanted to pause for a second and talk about a couple things. I think the quote that you shared before, that's clearly extremely harmful and was the genesis of, or at least part of the genesis of colonialism here in Canada. Speeding forward to today, we talk a lot about cultural humility and practices about starting to unlearn the language that has been taught to us in schools over generations, so that we can move towards a place of cultural humility. And by cultural humility, we're really thinking about this lifelong practice of unlearning and relearning ways that people work, ways that people live, ways that people are, and approaching these cultural differences with humility. There's really no other better word to describe it, but in a way that is accepting and integrative and additive in the way that we move through the world. So for me, it's if you're thinking about where to start, I always recommend engaging with resources that come from the communities that you serve. So whether that's community newsletters or local journalism or reports, thinking about, or starting to read and learn about language that the community uses themselves, I think is incredibly helpful. Can you share your approach to kind of this cultural and racial literacy and how move forward, towards the path of cultural humility?
So I think to start, it's really important to go about it honestly and understand why you want to do that work and why you want to uncover that education and that awareness. And then it's kind of like what you said exactly, Tessa, is looking to resources that communities have to offer to educate. I really love that, territorial acknowledgements. You really did a beautiful one at the beginning, where they're evolving in a lot of ways. I think it's really important when you do that deeply personal work, when you do a territorial acknowledgement, to connect it back to why it's important to you, or making it a bit more meaningful. And so I think that while there is some information being provided by communities, it's important to understand that communities are quite limited when it comes to capacity. And so one thing a lot of my mentors and friends who are Indigenous mention is that, the most meaningful thing you can do is doing your own education and not expecting Indigenous individuals to teach it to you. And so what we do often at 50th Parallels, we use our platform for education and awareness building. And so we'll post ways individuals can access this information on their own. There are courses available now that are free in Canada, which we're so lucky to have, that goes deep into Indigenous history and what we've seen right from the beginning to what we're seeing in activism now and the issues that are being brought to light in BC. There is the BC Treaty process that has been around for decades, where we're seeing Indigenous communities going through the process of being self-governing. And so, accessing those associations' website for more information, reading, about cultural movements and issues that are top of mind. We'll get into this a bit later in slides, but doing your own learning, accessing education, reading Indigenous literature, asking questions, attending events, with National Indigenous Peoples Day just around the corner. A lot of communities host their own events and they use it as an opportunity to build awareness as well around their communities. And so that's a great way to start.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you talked about acknowledgements of traditional lands and territories too, because I think it goes hand in hand with something that a lot of folks who maybe come from or immersed in dominant culture don't realize, and that's the power of an introduction. So for many Indigenous cultures, and I think this is applicable to any racialized or marginalized communities where they're not certain if who they're interacting with is safe or is going to perpetuate harm. So the power of an introduction can go a long way. I know for Indigenous communities, it is tradition to start off conversations, or when you're meeting someone new, to share at a minimum your name, where you come from, and that's not just like geographically, but also your family, and also as a way of kind of sharing gratitude for the land that you're on and gratitude to the people that have kind of gathered you together. Do you have any other kind of learnings on introductions that have really helped you in your practice?
I think that one thing I've learned, I've been working with communities for over a decade now, and They do, you're right. They want to know about your family. Like I've had communities ask me, who are your parents? Like they don't know who my parents are, but they want to know the names of my parents. They want to know who raised me. They want to know, you know, where I'm from, what I've learned, who are my, like, do I have siblings? And so that personal connection is so valuable to build a relationship. And so I really keep that, even the naming. So sometimes I'll introduce myself and explain the meaning of my name and who it was given to me and why. And that is also very common as well. And I think that just approaching it from a very personal perspective is meaningful. And yeah, with the territorial acknowledgement, I think things that I've seen and I hear a lot of is that people say, you know, live, work, and play. I think that those kinds of terms or taking lightness to a territorial acknowledgement isn't often the best approach, because it's not meaningful. It's not like, oh, I did the work and I really understand why I'm doing this and why it's important to me to do it. It's more like, oh, I heard someone say it this way and it sounds, you know, like it sounds appropriate, but it's not that personal approach that would really support that long-term meaningful relationship building that is required of working with a marginalized community or an Indigenous community. So yeah, I think I would, if anything, I would discourage from maybe regurgitating things that have been said by others that aren't meaningful to you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I will hop off mute. Let you go back at it.
Thanks, Tessa. So yeah, one of the main themes we're going to discuss is finding respectful language to honor the communities you serve. Tessa, you can go to the next slide. So we have a very specific approach to how we work with communities that we'll go over in the following slides. Really what I'm going to focus on more so is how to listen first and learn with intention. But I'll begin by saying, you know, as a non-Indigenous company, we've done a lot of learning to understand our place when it comes to working with marginalized communities. And we take great care in approaching each and every relationship individually, especially with openness, respect, and eagerness to learn, regardless of our own past experiences and biases. And so really it's about sitting and understanding that each nation has their own set of values, protocols, and ways of being. And so one thing that I noticed when I started working with communities, I was once hired by a tribal council, and my mandate was to create communication strategies for the 13 nations that they served. And when I was going into communities, I was reading these strategies that they had done before, and they all looked really familiar. And I quickly realized that these strategies were templates. And just like there was like almost a copy and paste job. Nation's name was updated, number of members was updated, but the goals and the tactics and the deliverables and the strategies were all the same, and that wasn't effective. And these communities didn't understand why they were still having members saying that they needed to do more communications, there needed to be more transparency. And it was because the person who wrote those strategies for those communities didn't understand that each nation is so different. They may be part of the same territory, they may be neighboring territories, but they are so different in comparison. And so it's really about like really starting from scratch. And listening and not assuming that because you've worked with another community or similar client, that it's going to be identical to this one. No two nations, like I said, are alike, and a template approach just doesn't work. Early in the early years of 50th Parallel, I used to say I don't believe in templates. And so that's something that I've carried over for all the clients we work with. I think it's really important to think about, how do you start something from scratch? How do you make something fresh and new and innovative each and every time you look at creating it? We'll talk about listening first and learning with intention as core principles to doing this work. And collaborate with meaning and taking real action. When this slide deck gets circulated, there will be some additional information supporting those 2 points. So listening first, hold space to listen and reflect on the needs, values, and cultural protocols of nations. And so this goes with language as well, taking the time to listen and learn. Question your assumptions and grow an understanding of Indigenous culture and history will have a large impact in the relationships you plan to build. So exactly what I mentioned earlier is taking the time to do your own awareness building, education, listening, there's so many great podcasts now out there. We listen to quite a few from CBC Indigenous around residential school projects. That's a large majority of the work we do now. And, so we're lucky to have that access now. 10 years ago, when I was starting out this work, there was very limited available for a non-Indigenous person to educate themselves on how to do this meaningful work. Decolonizing your understanding can at times be hard and uncomfortable in a society built on colonial foundations. This reframing can feel as if it goes against the grain. This doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. And so you hear a lot, especially here in Canada, about decolonizing language. There's also a talk about decolonizing processes. And, looking at, there is no such thing as a timeline or deadline or an agenda when you're working with communities. It's about going with the flow and being really intentional about what you're doing and holding space, not having a set agenda. And so that carries over into considering language in the work that you do. This work is not always linear. Doing the work can take time, and I encourage you to keep it going and have the patience with yourself in the process. So you are going to screw up. It's going to be inevitable. And so the biggest lessons are going to come from those mistakes that you make. Learn with intention. So really, really important. Learning can be constant. Even I've been doing this work for over 10 years. I'm still learning. Language is constantly evolving. And so I try to really keep an open mind each and every time I work with communities, and always asking questions whenever I can. It will take time, and success comes with practicing being open. So like I said, like any new experience, coming in without set expectations or presumptions will allow for an authentic and positive experience. Accept what you don't know, that you don't know at all. So taking a unique experience as an opportunity to grow. So that's really important. I mentioned that earlier.
Awesome. And I wanted to chat a little bit about following community leadership when we're on this subject. There's a phrase that I honestly should get tattooed on my body at this point, but it's move at the pace of the relationship. I remember, you just mentioned timelines. A lot of people don't realize, for many Indigenous communities, even the concept of time is different than what we might have in white or dominant culture, where a task will take as long as it's meant to take. We're not going to complete it on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. just because we say so. When you're taking an indigenized approach for many cultures, it's going to happen when it happens. So I like to share that example of it's essential that you take time to just really understand those cultural differences and move forward with acceptance. Whose deadline are we on? Whose timeline are we on? Are super important questions to ask. And I'd love to hear from you, Naz, these protocols and customs and ways of being. What's your advice to kind of finding these out? How do you learn about them?
So what we often do when we first start working, especially with a new client, new Indigenous client, is that we have this kickoff meeting and we ask questions around, what is your process? Who is involved in this? What is your protocol? Who needs to be provided approval? Who needs to be consulted on? So one of our clients, for example, they consult their hereditary leaders on any external communications being done, any announcements to the general public and to their membership as well. They can consult their hereditary chiefs. It's not always done for each and every piece that's created, but definitely for the high level. So key messaging, news releases, they consult their Hawia. And so it's not part of their formal government structure, but that is their cultural protocol. And so we spend, sometimes those kickoff meetings can be quite lengthy. Because a lot of times these communities were never asked these questions before, and they just do it. It's just like, it's kind of an unspoken thing, right? It's just like, they just know to do it, and no one's ever questioned them about it. And so as an outsider coming in, it's really important to ask these questions so that we can get really clear, because with PR and communications, oftentimes we're brought in when something needs to be done in a short time frame, something like it is really confidential or timely, or there's an announcement that needs to be done in a certain amount of time. So it's about balancing what their expectations are with what needs to be delivered on. And so we're really lucky now that we get, because we've been doing this work for a while, the clients that we work with, there's a trust already established there, because we've either worked with someone in their community, or they were referred to us by someone that they trust. And so we can have really honest conversations about, okay, I understand that this is protocol. We'll of course consider that and make sure that that's part of our process. And then also having a back and forth about what we need to deliver on what they want. So setting those realistic expectations really in those first meetings are important, and understanding that, we're not going to be judged for the questions that are going to really support the process overall. We have a designer that is non-Indigenous, who often creates a lot of materials for our clients. And so ways, I'll speak to this later with the examples that I have, but ways that we try to identify in that first meeting is, what are symbols and meanings that are really important to you that we need to consider and capture in the content that we create? Who are artists that we can work with that can guide us in the work that we're doing? How can we co-create together? So it's really important to have those set of questions in the beginning, so that you can understand how to execute on the work moving forward in a way that feels good for everyone.
Yeah, totally. And the one last thing I would add there too is, set aside your budget to hire cultural consultants for whatever community that you're working with. I think this is super important. If you don't yourself come from the community, it's a practice that I do. And honestly, I love it, because it is such a privilege to be able to connect with these knowledge holders who can help you build those community connections. So make sure you're paying them well for their work. Get out your budgets, get out your general ledgers. These people are doing extremely important work. But yes, cultural consultants, super underline that. Back over to you.
And good point, Tess. And I will add, it's really good to make sure that if you can have them be from that community that you're working with. It's not always an option, because communities are so stretched. The demand of what they need to deliver on is vast right now. So that's not always an option. So always try to, the best way you can is to identify someone within the community, or identify someone that you can work with to help build capacity. And so that's one thing that we really focus on is there someone who is wanting to do more communications work, whether it be an admin person who kind of does social media on the side? Can we involve them in part of the process and train them, and so that there's not a reliance or a dependency on us moving forward? And we can give this work to you, and you can take it and make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
So like I said, ask questions and do your own learning, and then really important, continue to do your own education and read about social and cultural movements, not just in the country that you reside, but like across the world. Like there are so many cultural and social movements happening with Indigenous communities in New Zealand and Australia and Hawaii that are really kind of leading the way in rebuilding their culture. And so I think it's really important to learn from other societies, other cultures, and see how they're defining the work for themselves. Okay, so looking at a couple examples of how we've done this with our clients when it comes to language revitalization and honoring their language. So these are two different clients. One is the House in Tofino, British Columbia, and one is Sashot in Port Alberni, British Columbia, both on Vancouver Island. And so these were taken from their media kits that we created. One thing that's really important for both of these communities is using language in any opportunity we can identify. And so Anne Atleo is the lead for the residential school project for her community. What they did, actually, the shot ended up doing this as well, is finding a traditional name to represent the project itself. So theirs means honoring our ancient ones. And so that was something that we made sure to have on all the materials moving forward. And always putting the English word in the paragraphs is really important because it's secondary to their language. Same thing with Wamish Ken Watts. When we were booking media interviews for him, we always identified him as Wamish. And so just being really consistent is also important in respecting languages for communities. We can go to the next slide. Perfect. So here are a few more materials. One thing that we look to do quite often with our Indigenous clients, especially if they're doing any media relations work, is doing a language revitalization guide in their media kits. And so something we noticed as we started to incorporate Indigenous language more in print materials and in media relations is that the media will not capture it in their publications. And we've heard things actually from Canadian press say that they don't have access to the symbols to include the language in the articles that they wrote about an announcement that we did. And so we circulate information about fonts to use so that you can use those symbols and hold media accountable. So that's really important for us, is that we continue to hold the general public accountable to defining reconciliations for themselves and really reflecting in being the best advocate for our clients that we can possibly be. And so these revitalization pieces are really essential to that. These live on our clients' websites when some major announcement is done. In these cases, these were residential school project announcements for 2 different nations. They created materials for the general public and for survivors and their members so that they can hang on to the research and information that was provided to the general public. And so, yeah, language was a strong focus of all of these materials for them. One thing I wanted to touch on is the evolution of terms as well. And so I mentioned earlier how important it is to show up and work for clients as if you're working for them for the first time and starting from scratch. And so when we work with clients who are doing residential school project announcements, what we've seen in the last few projects we've done is that there's been an evolution of the term survivor. So some nations, they like to use the word survivor. Some nations like to use the word former students. And most recently, we've seen the use of warriors and babies and children. So we ask often a lot of questions around the outcome or the energy they want to convey when they do these announcements to the general public and to the media. What does the world need to understand about this information that you're sharing, and how do we convey that through language? And so what we've seen most recently in our last project is that survivors is a limiting term, and it doesn't capture the essence of how they want these individuals to show up. And so warriors has started to emerge, right, as an empowerment term, as reclaiming that space and showing that they have survived, and they will continue to fight for those who didn't make it home and for the survivors that remain. And so really, we are open to anything and everything that they want to define when they're doing these materials. We've even used the word babies and children because it is about the children. It is about children from the past. It's about children who didn't make it home. It's about the children of the future. And so terms are really important and can be very diverse across clients and projects. And so these are 2 examples of media releases that we've done for 2 different clients and their preferred terms used in each. And then one other thing, and not that we've seen also with communities, is the decolonizing language around members. And so that is an Indian term, very technical. And so members are defined as Indigenous peoples living on reserve or registered with the communities. Communities are starting to use other terms such as on and off reserve members is something that is actually we're starting to see less of, but at home and away from home members and citizens. So some nations that are going through the BC Treaty process are self-governing, their members are considered citizens of their nation. And so terms that are all encompassing are starting to emerge. And so they can be quite different nation to nation. Okay, and so a challenge. So we have been called out by members and overlooked by potential clients for being non-indigenous and labeled as individuals with no capacity to understand cultural protocols or the significance of language. To that, I say we don't assume to know, but we are here to listen, learn, and co-create. Although there is much work to be done, we value and appreciate being welcomed in communities, and to that reconciliation is not just a word to be thrown around, but rather the essence of the work we do. And so that is probably the largest challenge we've experienced, especially now. In the beginning, when I started doing this work, there was such a lack of access to individuals that had the skill set to work with communities. So they were just kind of pulling in whoever they could to get the work done. And now we're really lucky. We live in a space a decade later where Indigenous people who've gone away as children, as students are coming home and working for their communities. So that's really great to see because we have worked so long and with so many, we worked with over 30 nations in Canada. We get pulled in for some very specific projects. And, you know, as a non-Indigenous person, it's really important for me to identify opportunities to work collaboratively with that community, to identify other Indigenous people to bring on into the project, but also to be open to, yes, I don't know what you've gone through. I can't say that I can relate in the same way that you what you've had to experience. And so yeah, being humble, being open, and just understanding that, you know, we're never going to know everything and do this perfectly. And so let's try to work through this together to create the best that we can and create content that you're happy and proud to deliver on. So, yeah.
Awesome. I wanted to unpack that a little bit more, Naz, because I do, you know, and I appreciate your vulnerability. Mistakes happen, mistakes are made. In my experience, they often happen when people are moving forward, like you said, with false assumptions and putting the cart before the horse. You know, not understanding that you might have outcomes that you want to achieve in terms of diversity, justice, equity. But if you're not co-creating with the communities that you're serving, who does it really benefit in the end? You know, I think it's you know, you could hear examples of, you know, let's say an organization, they've raised money or they've set aside budget to go build a basketball court in a remote First Nations community. Maybe that community is like, we don't need basketball courts, we need shoes, you know, for our citizens to be able to participate. So I think that's super important not to put the cart before the horse. Do you have any other examples of maybe where mistakes have been made and how those were managed?
I mean, there are lots of examples. I think if in any context, really, and when it comes to PR and communications, is that you acknowledge the mistake, you do the best you can to fix it and learn from it to move forward. But I have one specific example that comes to mind that was quite direct. Oftentimes I'll be asked to facilitate community meetings. And one time I went into a community brand new, never have met any of the members before. And one member I had gone through best practices, or they had called it rules of engagement for the meeting. And at the end, one woman called out to me and said, "Who are you? And are you here to police us?" And so I was like, definitely thrown off by it. And so my response was, you know, I'm not here to police you. I'm here to make sure that there's a safe space for everyone to speak. And I'm just here as a facilitator of that. And, you know, I definitely don't want to come across as policing, but definitely want to make sure that people feel safe to share here. And so that was my response to that. But yeah, I think I go into those situations knowing that that would potentially happen. And I think I'm able to kind of work through and create a response that is somewhat acceptable, I would assume, and really be clear and not shy away from being challenged in that way or being called out in that way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think that type of anticipation too can help, yeah, you prepare and hopefully mitigate those things from happening. But we're all on learning journeys.
And one thing I will add, something that's another non-Indigenous consultant had shared with me, is that sometimes not all communities are ready to do the work with you. And so when there is constant pushback, that means they're not quite ready yet. And that has nothing to do with you. And so keeping that in mind, I have had clients that we started working out with that it didn't work out. Because they weren't quite ready. And, you know, we were so enthusiastic about what we could accomplish together. But yeah, it just wasn't a good fit. And that's okay too. That's okay to say, you know, it doesn't serve either of us. And as communicators in the impact space, I think getting clear on that and accepting when it doesn't work is also really important. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. Yeah, and in light of this, the whole overarching theme, reconciliation is the shared responsibility of Canadians. This was said by Celeste Haldane, as Chief Commissioner for the BC Treaty Commission. This is something that I've said over and over again and has guided a lot of the work that I've done recently, is considering how do I define reconciliation for myself, not how it has been defined by others for me. And then just to end, there is still much work to be done. This work is slow, intentional, and ongoing. You know, for us as communicators, especially in the PR space, we really want to deliver things quickly, high octane, high fuel. And so this is very slow moving. And so it's good to hold space for that. There's no set of rules to follow, but only lessons to be learned. Be understanding and aware of yourself and other nations. This is precedent setting work. This is precedent setting work. This is so important to remember. A lot of times we're going into communities doing work that has never been done before, but it's setting the bar for others. So good to keep that in mind. That can only be done if we walk alongside together, free of judgment and bias. So yeah, so thank you. Yeah, do you want to speak to this, Tessa? I think you.
Yeah, for sure. We intentionally planned this session ahead of National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada, because we don't want to have this session on the day and then you go forward and kind of think about it. We wanted to plant some good seeds so that everyone here has some takeaways so that you can be prepared for action on the day, action and celebration, I would say, because I think oftentimes when we have these conversations, they become rooted and unintentionally center the harm, the colonialism, the oppression that these communities face. But we equally need to celebrate joy, create space for joy, and create space for following the leadership of communities too. So yeah, just keep that in mind as we go forward. I don't know if you had anything else to add there, Naz.
No, we will circulate the slide deck with some small ways to also do that. One thing that my agency has done in the last few years, it created a trends report of things that we're seeing when it comes to specifically around Indigenous relations work. And so if anyone is interested in accessing that, as communicators, we find that it's really important to share what we've learned with other communicators. So that's available on our website, but we'll also link it in the resources that we'll send shortly after the session.
Amazing. We did have a question in the chat that I'd love to share with you. What do you think is the best way to identify, connect, and partner with cultural consultants, recognizing every nation or community is different?
Can you repeat the first part of that question? It just cut out a little bit.
Yeah, no worries.
What is the best
So
way?
what's the best way to connect with cultural consultants?
Oh, okay, yeah, so a couple different ways. In those kickoff meetings that we do, we often ask if there's anyone that they'd like us to work on within the community, that speaks specifically to the work that they're doing, you know, whether it be from a cultural perspective, a language perspective, protocol perspective, so identifying it that way. One thing that I've done proactively, throughout my career is identify co-collaborators. So Indigenous individuals that have worked with me on other projects, and bring them on to other work that I've done. So I do have friends that I've developed relationships with over the years that I've brought on to specific projects, that are complementary to the work that they're doing. One thing that I find quite interesting is that there's a high amount of burnout in Indigenous communities and with Indigenous consultants. And so there's less consultants who are Indigenous available to do this work, especially when it's community centered. They're actually kind of going and working in other industries just because of the generational trauma that comes up for a lot of Indigenous people. And so, yeah, just, you know, LinkedIn is a great resource as well. You know, looking for those individuals that are writing pieces around Indigenous issues that are Indigenous are a great way to tap into, and just asking around. You know, the work that we do is very referral focused. And so that's very common in this space, is to just ask and identify individuals, you know, like, oh, I'm always happy to share those resources as well too. So yeah, there's a few different ways, but asking the community first is usually a good first start.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so helpful. And I know we're coming up to time, so just wanted to reiterate all of the really good information that you shared, and that I think that you know, can be applied to serve Indigenous communities and other racialized and marginalized communities. Move at the pace of relationship. Don't be afraid to reach out and, you know, ask for cultural connections and build those connections so that you can have folks and advisors working for you. I think moving forward in a regenerative, additive way, being proactive, anticipating where there's opportunities to build trust, it is all part of it. I like to think about nothing about us without us. You know, we've heard this beautiful phrase applied to lots of different communities, and it's true. Make sure we're co-creating. That's another tattoo. We can all get together. Let's get co-create tattoos together. Naz, I want to thank you so much for everything that you shared today. Again, ahead of National Indigenous Peoples Day on June 21st. I think you're setting us up in a really good way. And yeah, just excited to see all the work you're going to continue to do to support, you know, creating space for Indigenous voices and Indigenous stories, because they are rooted in justice and that impacts everyone. I'll just close by saying we're taking a summer break for programming for the Impact Communications Institute. So we're going to spend as much time adventuring and regenerating outdoors as we can, and we'll look forward to welcoming you back inside in the fall. In the meantime, please take our survey. I'll give you 10 seconds to click on this link. We're interested in learning more about what you think of our programming and initiatives. It'll take about 5 minutes, and you'll get a chance to win a $100 Visa gift card. So thanks in advance for your insights. And thank you so much for joining today. I really, really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tessa. And just quickly add, since we have communicators on the call, is I'll be in Chicago for the IABC World Conference at the end of the month. And so if anyone's going to be in Chicago and has time for a coffee, I'd love to meet you in person. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this really important topic. And thank you everyone for your time.
Thanks, Naz. Community connections, what it's all about. See you all soon.
Okay, bye-bye.